When and where were you born?
Well, I was born in 1939. My parents lived in North Cove. Of course, I happened to be born in the hospital down here. I had an older brother and an older sister. We lived on the farm. And after I got 4 years old, my mother went back to teaching and I started to school. And I started to school at North Cove. I was pretty young, and since we lived less than a mile from the school, I couldn't ride a bus. We had to get there some other way, and since Mother went early, usually my sister got the job of taking me to school. And sometimes we were late and she would pick me up and carry me. And I went to what was called a low first and a high first. Today we would say kindergarten and first grade. And I finished high school there because that's where schools were. When the day was over at school, you went home and you worked. If it was haying time, you helped rake up the hay and put it in a stack. Or sometimes you drove the horses while you was raking. And then somebody had to go get the cows up, feed them, milk them, and one day a week we did the wars, so forth. And of course at that point in the time, we didn't have electricity. Because back during the wartime, things didn't get out. There was a few places that had electricity, I'd seen, but we didn't have it because it wasn't up in their neck of the woods. So we had the kerosene lamps. And we had to draw our water with our arms. And you heated it by building the fire. That's what some of the things were like at home. And of course you didn't do much reading at home at night because it's hard to do much by candle or by a lamp, but we did. Now, I enjoyed now the days that it was snowy and we couldn't go to school. I enjoyed that because we'd work on a quilt or something at home, not have to get out much except to feed the horses and cows, but work like that. My brother drove a school bus for a while, but still I couldn't ride it because it was too close, so he drove a bus and we did the best we can. Then when I got in high school, we had a car by then, and I would ride with my mother to school. And somebody says, well, what type of things did you get into at school? Well, sometimes we'd get kind of loud and they're talking a little bit, or we'd see the windows and want to look out the windows and see what somebody was doing outside instead of paying attention to what we was doing. And one part of our building, the windows not too high off the ground, and I've forgotten what the teacher was doing, but some of the boys tried to see if they could go out the window, get back in. And some of them caught. And they say that time or two they went down to the local stream and got into the water. Got in a little trouble like that. We didn't have cafeterias at first. That was something that came along later. We had, you took your own food, or later on, a family would send something, and we had what was called a soup kitchen. And they made soup from whatever people sent in for them to eat. So that's the way it was. Now, the school was added on to the time I was in high school, and we got the gym for the first time. Before that, if anybody played ball or anything, it was on the dirt outside. But in 1950s, we got about 51, we got the new part of the building, and it had a cafeteria, and it had a gym. So we were really feeling we were high up on that, because we could be inside, play in that gym, whatever. And when you was in elementary school, you had what was called recess sometimes, which was just a few minutes you could go outside, and maybe the boys would get a football or a softball, baseball or something and throw around, or you'd draw hopscotch on the dirt or things like that. But we really thought it was good when we got to high school. And we didn't have a very big class, so we knew about everybody and had pretty much the same teachers throughout. But I kind of liked the teachers pretty well, so I decided, I thought I'd be a teacher too. So I went to Appalachian and UNCG some too, and got my teaching degree. So when I first taught, I taught though in Buncombe County. Boy, was that an awakening. It was a larger school, more students, but the biggest thing I worried about was the chewing gum. I didn't have any problem with anybody talking back to me or anything like that. It was a pretty good time.
I got a real quick question. What was the school called that you technically went to in elementary school?
It was North Cove Elementary. So it was like K through 12 is what it was then. And then let's see, what year? Well, I was in Buncombe County 7 years, and then I came back and taught at North Cove High School. And that's when we consolidated and put it together. And that's when I moved to East Junior High. So when you said you went to East, I was wondering just how East was there. And I taught at East Junior High for 20 years. So, of course, I know the building has changed some now, but not a whole lot. It's basically like it is. Of course, it had been the old Marion High School. They turned it into the junior high. And I learned a lot of things from a lot of students. But one thing I did do that I don't know whether they do now or not is I was assigned to work with the cheerleaders. I went to every ball game. I was their supervisor. And if it so happened that the girls' team happened to have a male coach, I had to go in the restroom or in where they were meeting so that there was nobody else around. Well, we had some that would like to pick at things and tell stories and, put a little on, and they started smoking in the bathroom and things like that. I know you don't know anything about now. Surely that doesn't happen anymore. But a lot of things are, a lot of difference. Would I go back? There's some things I would really like to have to say I could do now like I did then, but physically I couldn't do what I did then. And I had some that I remember for what they did on the good side, and I have some I remember not quite on that same category, having taught. When you see a name in the paper or something, sometimes you say, oh yeah, I remember that. So it was a pretty good time. Do you like East?
Pretty good. I heard it's changed a lot from what it used to be.
Yes, it has. Well, their whole system has changed a lot. In fact, when I was at East is when we started to get computers. And the first computers that we had, they sent us from the elementary school and down from the high school. And my job was to introduce everybody to computers in about a 9-week class. And then as I was getting ready to go, then they were going to get us a computer lab and new computers. So I said, that's one thing I left behind that I thought was pretty good, but I wasn't ready to go back to school to be on the computer business.
How is the world today different from what it was like when you were a kid, other than the fact that there wasn't no electricity?
Well, there were no cell phones. In fact, when we didn't have electricity, we didn't have a telephone in the community except the one that was with the railroad. And sometimes we could get a message back and forth that way. And not everybody had a car that they could go to. You know, we used the that and the other, but as things got better, of course, in times after the war, it got better. Most people had some, but they'd make maybe one trip to town a week or something. Not the long trips. And of course, up until the 50s or so, as far as the schools, we didn't have school buses to take us to athletic games or anything like that. It was the parents taking them or the coaches taking them. And then we started working on getting activity buses going on. So it's still though the same way. If you want something, you have to save for it. As you're finding out, a lot of things now are a lot higher price than they were then, but still then, you know, you didn't always have that nickel in your pocket to buy that Coke with that you thought you wanted. You had to earn it.
Ironic. Back when things were cheap, no one had the money to buy it, but now when everything's expensive, everybody has the money to buy it.
Well, it seems that way a lot. Again, it's what people put their priorities on. And for my family, the priority was, of course, that we had what we needed to eat, but also that we were able to get our education and to go on and do something to help someone else at the same time. I know that studying McDowell County history and North Carolina state history is important, but McDowell County did have people who were a part of our founding of the country on back. The McCall family had people in the Revolutionary War. So my father was a direct descendant of the Revolutionary War through his father's side. But his mother was a Conley, and the Conleys had also fought in the Revolutionary War. So my siblings and I qualify for Daughters of American Revolution through both McCall and Conley families. Now, interestingly enough, later on, my grandfather McCall, in the time of the Civil War, was captured up at Linville Caverns as they came through. And he had been working with a group trying to get material to make bullets. But they were captured there. They were taken way up north, across a river, and then they were turned loose. Their knives were taken. They were turned loose and said if they could swim the river, they could get back home. But a lot of them got sick up there and had a very, very hard time to get up. Now, after he got back to what was then still part of Burke County, that was before the separated, he and my grandmother, who was in Conley, got married in the 60s and built a house on the farm place. And in 1885, that house burned down because somebody carried a little lamp, sort of like Aladdin's lamp. It didn't have a globe on it, lit up to go and pull down some windows, and it caught a curtain on fire. And so the house was rebuilt then in 1887, which is the current house that is still there.
Ms. McCall, thanks for the interview.
Well, I've enjoyed talking to you and remembering some of the events.